Going beyond the headlines. Asking the questions you want answered. Exploring government policies and how they impact you. We are delving deeper.
2023 saw the return of masqueraders to the Savannah stage.
A keenly contested local government elections which ended in yet another tie.
The hosting of the Commonwealth Youth Games.
The RIC proposes new electricity rates for TNTech customers.
Good evening, Happy New Year to each and everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Delving Deeper for 2024. I am Ayana Carter.
Good evening, I am Sonolala. Join us over the next hour as we look back at the major talking points from our Delving Deeper series over the last year. Now, Ayana, we have a lot to recap this evening, and a good place to start would be with our junior athletes who took part in the Commonwealth Youth Games held right here in TNT.
Now, two of those athletes, Nikolai Blackman and Janae Degans, joined us on the show and shared being amongst the first TNT nationals to medal at the Games.
So I ended up in finals in like lane 6. And I was like, okay, first race of Commonwealth. Let's not try to disappoint her. And then I was like, okay, first 100. I was like, and I realized, I'm ahead of everybody. Am I going out too fast? And I was like, let me try and slow down a little bit just so I don't get too tired. Then last 50, third 50, my friend and I flip at the same time. And then coming on, I was like, okay, I have him because I already know how he swims based on all the other competitions.
Yeah.
And then I touch you all, mom screaming down the place, dad behind the block crying, apparently.
I go to school, go to my classes, and then from school I had to go to training. So I had to balance both schools and track and field. And sometimes that really is something hard for athletes, to balance school and track and field. But I couldn't do it without the support of my parents and family and also God.
Yeah.
Now, if you do remember, Team TTO won a total of 15 medals at those games. Let's take the opportunity to congratulate all the athletes who took part in the games.
And I had the pleasure of interviewing both Nikolai and Janae when they were on the show. And Sunil, we are in good hands when it comes to our athletes. We're definitely in good hands.
Definitely. History was created in June 2023 when a son of the soil was elected president of the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly. His Excellency Ambassador Dennis Francis took up official duties last September. In outlining his plans for the next 2 years, Ambassador Francis explained what his new appointment means to him as well as to the people of TNT.
This is groundbreaking in the sense that it's the first time. But we must also bear in mind that it is the first time we've ever stood for that office. So it's quite an honor and a privilege. But I should also say it is quite a heavy responsibility and not one to be taken lightly in any way. Because the President of the General Assembly has an extremely important role to play in the conduct of the negotiations that go on in the United Nations. And the international community expects the President of the General Assembly to execute that function fairly, transparently, and justly. And that is precisely how I am going to be doing it. Dr. Williams told us 63 or 64 years ago, the future of the nation lies in your school bags. Every time I have heard that speech, I felt as if Dr. Williams was speaking to me personally. The fact of the matter is that 63 years later, that statement still rings true. The future of the nation does lie in the nation's children's school bag. And I'm saying this because I want the students of Trinidad and Tobago to apply themselves, to be diligent and disciplined, and to feel that they can be successful too, because they can. I'm the living example, not from a house of privilege, And I rose to become the president of the General Assembly. Many of those children will make us proud in the future by becoming doctors, physiotherapists, radiation oncologists, maybe even astronauts. We don't know. And I would say to the adults, invest in and nurture your children and their education. Nurture your children and their education, because that is what will set them free and give them a chance to self-actualize and to make the finest contribution they can make to Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago has given us all a lot. We all owe it back something. It's time to pay it back.
This was something Foreign and CARICOM Affairs Minister Dr. Amory Brown spoke about when he first appeared on our show in 2022. And when it became official, Dr. Brown shared what this historic moment meant for the people of TNT.
It really sends a note of value and appreciation for the caliber of individual that we produce in this country. It sends the right signal across the globe in terms of our ability as a small developing country to produce a diplomat of the level of Ambassador Francis, who can serve as the president of the United Nations General Assembly. We are assured that Ambassador Francis will serve with distinction and will bring further pride and glory to the nation of Trinidad and Tobago in the manner in which he executes his responsibilities and the manner in which he fulfills the duties of president.
That's right, Sunil. Dr. Brown also spoke about the 45th CARICOM Heads of Government meeting, which was held in early July. As we look into the future, 10 years and beyond, what role do you think young people will play, especially in driving this CARICOM agenda forward into what we want it to be?
You've hit the nail on the head. Young people are the key. The success or stumbling of the future of CARICOM depends on the generations to come. So it behooves us as the current leadership, the current policymakers, to focus on them specifically, to seek to inspire them to achieve more, to break down the barriers that currently exist, to hold hands with our brothers and sisters across the region, whether they speak English or French or Dutch or any other language within this Caribbean family, and to always remember that we are stronger together.
Now, Dr. Brown, the reality is that in 50 years, you and I may not be here, and maybe some of our viewers may not be here. But as we sit here today, in 50 years' time, what do you hope that CARICOM, that vision of CARICOM, would look like?
Well, I would want to see the CARICOM family even further expanded. Right now, we're in the final stages of consideration of additional membership requests from Martinique, from Curacao, Aruba, Guadeloupe in the future, and there are many other territories within our region that are recognizing that CARICOM has something special and they want to be a part of it. That should be a signal to us. If others want to join us, there's something unique and full of promise about CARICOM. So I'd want to see a larger CARICOM family. I'd want to see lower barriers, a diminution of the things that keep us apart, and a celebration and an elevation of the things that we have in common. I'd want to see us all embracing things like a final court of appeal, a common platform for public health, for education, and a greater sense of harmony across the region. I'd want to see us all embracing the various aspects of our culture All of these aspects are important and speak to who we are. And so we shouldn't be picking and choosing and say this is for us and that's for them. It's all about us. And so all of it belongs to us. And that sense of pride, that sense of ownership is something that I would like to see us fully achieve in the decades to come. So when I'll be there, and I hope you are as well, when we join to celebrate our centenary, the 100th anniversary of CARICOM, we can look with pride at a generation of leaders. Some of them would be children today, maybe looking at this program, who will be able to represent this region with pride. We will have new prime ministers, new presidents. We may have another president of the General Assembly. And CARICOM will be a force to reckon with on the global stage. We're setting the foundation for that right now. And it is my hope that the fruits of that labor will be harvested in the future.
As we're on the topic of CARICOM, regional leaders were here in TNT for a 2-day symposium on crime in mid-April. As you know, crime continues to be a major challenge for law enforcement.
It was for me a very welcoming embrace of my Caribbeanness, and I was particularly struck by the leadership of Dr. Rowley, Prime Minister, to have had the foresight and the sense of the now to invite the symposium to Trinidad and Tobago to talk about something which we are all very concerned about, crime. But not just crime, crime as a threat, as the Prime Minister of Jamaica put it, which has the potential to threaten our very existence because it is revealing as a symptom that there is a lot that we need to fix in our societies. So it touched on education, it touched on our psychological health, it touched on a number of things, our health systems, the threat to our very sense of comfort and being. And I came away from that symposium remarkably impressed by the sense of commitment of Caribbean leaders, by the sense of the strong camaraderie that exists among our CARICOM leaders, because that's very important, the respect that they have for Dr. Rowley, and their willingness to share with us something which, understandably in our context, we might think is our problem and our problem only, which is crime. But the reality exists for us throughout the Caribbean, and we were able to come together and recognize in the symposium that we had and the several conversations that we are all facing a problem that is common to all of us, and we're only going to be able to deal with it and get on top of it if we join hands and deal with it together.
During his most recent interview with us, Minister of National Security Fitzgerald Hinds revealed some of the initiatives which have been implemented to fight crime.
We have improved our marine craft. Right now, we have allocated a substantial amount of that money to resailing some of the vessels that are not sailing now due to the need for maintenance and repair. So this is one of the things we have done. We also recognize that in this border security effort, our legal ports of entry have proven to be some of the most vulnerable elements of our nation's experience. As a result, we have continued to train and professionalize the personnel who must manage these borders. In particular, we, Trinidad and Tobago, signed on to 2 international and best practice formulae, AirCop dealing with our airports and CCOP dealing with the marine ports or seaports. And we have trained the personnel, we have resourced them, and they are on the job. We have allocated money and we are in the process of obtaining more scanners. We already have fixed scanners. We are getting a couple more of those. We are getting some mobile scanners. We are getting 16 more hand scanners, improving the use of technology in dealing with this issue. And so, in addition to that, we have allowed our personnel to be exposed to the best-in-class training anywhere in the world you could think about, send them on programs, we bring professionals here to further professionalize and train them. All of these things we do in terms of immigration, because human trafficking is one of the issues. We have improved the technology that we use in the immigration division to better manage our borders. So altogether, border security is a major plank of our efforts at national security, and we give a lot of time and attention to those.
While murders continue to be a major challenge, the minister did applaud the work of the Cold Case Unit, a component of the Homicide Bureau of Investigations.
Police are now reporting to me, particularly the Homicide Bureau of the Police Service, that they, between CERU, which is an internal analytical unit of the police service, and the Forensic Science Center, they are making great progress. You would have seen we established a cold case unit where some experience of retired police officers, along with serving police officers, would have come together and would have paid close attention to some matters, murder matters that would have been unsolved. And they began to revisit some of these cases. And last year, the police solve rate improved, and a number of the cases for which they would have charged, you would have seen a prison officer charged recently. He was not a prison officer when the murder took place, but he entered the prison service and he was recently charged for that murder. It didn't stop there for me, because the question was for me, how did he get into the prison service while he may have been a suspect? So I told you my job involves problem solving. So I went into that with the prison service to look at the way they vet in their recruitment of personnel. I did the same for the Defense Force. And we are working to improving those.
TNT held the local government elections in August last year, and it resulted in yet another tie. A major talking point on the campaign trail was that of local government reform.
In our local government package, we are addressing money, mobilization, manpower, and materials, 4 M's. And in doing that, we are saying we are capable of delivering faster service by removing the need to go to Port of Spain to ask for Rio Claro to get a pothole fixed. We're removing the need to go to Port of Spain to ask for Icarcus to get a drain fixed. Right there in the corporation can take the decision itself to do the job. Right there in the corporation, they can use local contractors. Right there in the corporation, they can use the money that they gain from residential property taxes. Right there in the corporation, they can have control over the CEO, who may not be acting as best as a CEO can. Right there in the corporation, we're going to give you full-time counselors. So what does that mean? It effectively means faster delivery of services and more jobs with more money, which means that the frustration that people feel, my light is blown, my drain is cracked and it's undermining my property, I can't pick up the garbage, the neighbor is overfilling here, there are rats and rodents, my children are at risk. That frustration that people feel, I'm driving my car and bam, I hit a pothole and my rim is broken. Those realities are realities because there's not enough money, it takes too long to process, you have to go to Mars, Jupiter, and Venus before you come back to the place to get it done. So our local government reform package fixes that because it works in tandem with public procurement law, which allows now, the public procurement law gives the corporation the power to procure all that it requires. A highway, a dustbin, a paperclip, they don't need to come to the ministry to ask for permission to do it. All that they need to know is that there's proof of funds.
As part of the reform, Diego Martin and Siparia became boroughs and each elected their first mayors. Two ministers who served in local government shared their views on this.
The fact of the matter is that there were criteria set out for the establishment of both Siparia and Diego Martin as boroughs, right? That has to do with population size, population density, the presence of a commercial center, things like contribution to the culture, contribution to the country, overall history. There are qualitative and quantitative metrics that are utilized in order for this, this designation to be granted to Siparia and to Diego Martin. But the most important component in this is the simple fact that the constituents of Siparia and the constituents of Diego Martin wanted this. The selected and elected members of the local government councils in Siparia and in Diego Martin both voted for it, both made the request for being awarded borough status. I am saying as the MP for Diego Martin Central, I am saying as a Diego Martian, I am saying as a former chairman that Diego Martin is also ready for borough status, and that it should not be tied up in this convoluted argument, really geared at a negative emotional attachment to local government reform, which is critically needed, and property tax, which is the funding backbone for true, effective and efficient local government reform.
And as former local government representatives, we know the importance of community, of being able to call yourself a San Fernandian, a Diego Martian, an Arimian, and one day, Dabity or Marion, wait for it, it will happen. It's important that people get a sense of community. And the same way that Minister Dana Riga and I moved from councillor, well, deputy mayor, chairman, mayor, there's a level of progress and promotion and elevation. And that is what is happening to these two new boroughs that we have. They worked hard for it, and other areas and spaces can aspire for that very same position. The borough of Chaguanas, the borough of Point Fortin, and why not the city of Arima one day? Well, unless city of Dabity or Mara happens. Well, it might. But the reason why it is important for us is because the people decide. And the people made their decision a very long time ago. And the government is simply pushing that agenda forward. And as my good friend said, this is why property tax is also important. Because your money will see about your space. When I want to paint my home, I don't go and ask others. I use my money and I paint it. It is the same concept when it comes to property tax and the boroughs. For a few extra dollars, your roads will be paved, your parks will be maintained, your schools and community centers will also be maintained. Why must it go to central government? If I could fix it here and now, and I think both Minister Dana Riga and I missed that as chairman and mayors. We had the ability to get something seen about right away. What we didn't have all the time was the funding. So, with this and the fact that local government reform is here, we think that this is brighter progress. And we definitely, as councillors who walk the walk, we are very happy for our colleagues.
When the 2023-2024 budget was read in Parliament last October, a few things stood out. The recruitment of 1,000 police officers and the continued multi-billion-dollar investment in health, education and national security. The $3 increase in the minimum wage. It should be noted that the increase in the minimum wage took effect on January 1st. Economists Dr. Marlene Atz and Dr. Dave Siratan both described the budget as fair, while explaining how it impacts the average citizen.
It's a tragedy that our population, I think, doesn't understand how Trinidad and Tobago functions. They see the government as the people who read the budget and who raise the price of rum and who raise the price of this and who raise the price of gas, etc., etc. And I think while those are honest opinions, and I think you know, touch and feel issues, and I think I don't discount them for a moment, because at the end of the day, you want to go to the supermarket, you want to jump in a vehicle, you want to do X, Y, and Z for your personal enjoyment. So what the government does at the macro level will impact on the average citizen. But I think there is insufficient understanding of how the economy functions. And let me just kind of weigh in on what I mean by that. If Trinidad and Tobago is essentially oil and gas, the difference to the average person matters not whether now we're more gas or more oil, or it matters not to the average citizen. They know it comes from the energy sector. And that sector is challenged, meaning that the government is not earning as much revenue as it used to. And that sector was the sector that brought in a lot of the foreign exchange. Then unless that is communicated in a way that the average Trinbagonian can embrace that, then the government is going to find itself even more challenged, because you're going to be challenged in terms of your revenue streams, but you're also going to be challenged in terms of a population that is demanding things from you that you are having difficulty to provide. And let us not lose the fact that we're going into pretty swiftly into an election period in Trinidad and Tobago. So the population is going to be looking for sweeteners. They're going to be looking for enticements and inducements to persuade them to behave a particular way. But if the population doesn't understand the challenge that we're facing, this then becomes the Minister of Finance's budget, and the Minister of Finance's this, etc., etc. So whether we want to talk about the business sector, that means absolutely nothing to the average Trinbagonian. The average Trinbagonian is interested in the fact that the minimum wage would have increased, and they probably have the opportunity to take more money home, but they are smart enough to know that having a little more money in my pocket, if I were at the minimum at the $17.50 and I'm now going to be at the $20.50 level, I have a little more money in my pocket, but they will ask themselves whether or not, A, if the price of gas goes up again, if that will impact on the additional $300 or thereabouts that I have. If the price of food continues to increase, then they will ask themselves whether or not the additional $300 that I now have, whether or not I will be able to spend more money in the grocery, whether I'll be able to have a better Christmas this year than I had last year, as it were. So for us, to me, one of the things I try to do always when I have the opportunity to chat about the economy is to bring it down to the level of what the average Trinbagonian can understand, because I think at the end of the day, we all want to live comfortably in a space, but I think we can do a better job of explaining the nuances of Trinidad and Tobago, as opposed to it simply being a conversation around the 30th to the 5th of October, where everybody is, you know, ears pressed to a radio, glued to a television, wondering whether rum going up and cigarettes going on. I think we have to elevate the conversations, and that's why I welcome the opportunity to come in and have a chat on this program, so that we can, at least in our spheres, understand what is happening.
Where do you see Trinidad and Tobago's economy in the next 6 to 12 months?
Well, I think we, based on the point that I made, I think we are in a better position than we were 2-3 years ago. But we're still not there. If you look at the growth rates in the economy, it's recovered, but it is not at the level before 2014. And the reason 2014 is important is 2014 is when the commodity super cycle ended. That is where extraordinary high commodity prices on oil and gas were the order of the day. So being a petroleum or an energy-based economy, of course that has consequences for us, right? And that even reaffirms and reinforces the fact that we need to transition. Even if we get in very, very high income streams from the Revenue Authority, now is the time to transition when you actually have resources. If you look at the Gulf states, which is the sector, they are plowing not millions of dollars, billions of dollars into the tourism development. And we have much more natural advantage in the tourism sector than they do, right? But one thing is evident from what the Gulf states are doing is the amount of capital investment you have to make. The tourism industry, for it to be successful, is a capital intensive program. The people are important, you know, but you need the capital to really be a competitive tourism destination, right? And it's on that front that I think the government need to make some more significant strides, especially with respect to Tobago. Because I think if you go to the hotels in Tobago and you go to hotels in Trinidad, I think Trinidad is fairly okay, right? But in Tobago, especially if you go to those hotels along Chevron Road in Tobago, and which have excellent views of the sea and so on, which is, you know, but when you go into you look at the physical plant and equipment and so on, you see people struggling because of the weaknesses in that area. And my heart goes out to them because, you know, remember, sometimes you get angry with them because of the kind of experience you have because of these problems. But you have to always remember that these are our people, right? When we're thinking about these things, we are trying to help them. And in helping them, we're going to help everybody else.
Now, during the course of our series, there were a few headline-grabbing stories you saw right here on Delving Deeper.
One such headline was the Attorney General addressing the staff shortage at the DPP's office.
Yes, we acknowledge that there are challenges in the DPP's department. I certainly acknowledge that there are staff shortages and also that the majority of, if not, well, many of the attorneys are relatively young. The more senior members of the DPP's department have moved on in their progression with their careers. Some of them have more recently become judges. So there is no question that there are staff shortages. The DPP and I have been having very meaningful, very mature conversations. Those conversations are ongoing, and I have made a very firm commitment to the director that we will work with him shoulder to shoulder to address the problems that he has, to ensure that he has an improved and efficient Director of Public Prosecutions Office. And that's an ongoing process.
And coming from that meeting, what assurances can you give to the members of the public who are looking at this situation and are expressing concern?
The assurances that I can give to the public are that given the nature of my personality, I engage people in meaningful ways, and I am a solutions-oriented person. I am therefore committed to working with the DPP. I acknowledge his problems. I'm not denying that he has challenges, and I have invited him, and I am happy to say he has accepted the challenge to work with me towards resolving his problems. And out of that, I expect very positive outcomes.
There was also the cyber attack at the Trinidad and Tobago Postal Corporation TT Post, which was followed by the cyber attacks at the AG's office and TSTT.
One of the things that we have recognized from TT Post and our treatment with the issue, and that fell directly in my garden because one of the committees I chaired then, which was the Security Committee, would have had the responsibility of, how to say, redesigning how TT Post responds to some of those type of challenges. We would only say that it originated from internal issues, and being that it had happened from internal issues, we looked at how vulnerable our whole platform and networks were to any potential cyber attack, whether now or in the future. So we take some action that allowed us the flexibility of being able to protect ourselves, but at the same time using some local expertise to redesign our network and our infrastructure as it relates to any potential cyber attack. And I'm trying to stay away from saying much more because so far we have been successful as it relates to what we have done. So if I could put it in a nutshell, there was an attempt, and I would categorize it as it is, as an attempt to attack our network. But that was quickly shut down, I believe, if I could remember correctly, and I stand to be corrected, it take all of 9 hours for us to pinpoint the source of the issue, shut down the source of the issue, and restart the Postal Corporation in the quickest turnaround time.
As we look ahead, here's a bit of what we can expect in 2024 from several ministries and state agencies.
One of the things we've been able to benefit from is the renegotiation, for example, of our price of gas. So whereas previously for decades it was on one fixed price, for example, a Henry Hub price, which today is $2, it could go up and down, we have managed to negotiate a basket price for our gas in Trinidad and Tobago. A basket price taking 1/3 in the Asian market, something called JKM, Japanese Korean marker, another third from the European market, either NBP or TTF, and then another third based on oil prices. So just by using that basket price for our gas, we get much higher prices for our gas than we traditionally did. And we calculated it the other day, just as a direct result of our negotiations with only 2 of the large companies in Trinidad and Tobago since 2019 or 2018 to the end of March of this year. We have gotten over $15.7 billion that we would not have gotten if we did not have that negotiation. So that's a direct tangible. Also, as a result of the discussions that we're having, we have people producing gas fields that they may not have produced before. So you have Shell doing things like Colibri, Barracuda. Just last week, I had a meeting with EOG, and EOG were thanking us for some of the decisions we took to work with them and to change the terms of some of their licenses to allow them to drill some wells that they would not have drilled that are producing better. With BP, they're doing Cassia Sea compression. You had all sorts of other fields that they're working on. Their infill drilling program is doing well. So these are some of the tangible results. Then on the geopolitical side, us standing at the table when you had a huge global push saying you need to move away from hydrocarbons and come off of oil and gas. The Prime Minister and myself in Doha, Qatar, last year, February, started a global conversation saying that gas is the clean energy source going forward. And it's amazing, just last week when we were in Washington, D.C., both of us were looking at an ad on Prime Time, one of the biggest American news networks, and they were now pushing the same conversation. Gas and renewables is the way forward. So these are some of the tangible things, and we are part of the decision-making process. Then also on the geopolitics, the world would have seen that Trinidad and Tobago, as a result of the discussions we had with the United States government, got an OFAC license, a waiver to pursue gas production, the gas production of a Venezuelan field called Dragon. I've made many trips to Venezuela as well, negotiating with the Venezuelan government, meeting with President Maduro, Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, their ministers of energy and these types of things. So we are working very hard, all for the benefit of the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
The law mandates that the RIC should undertake a rate review for water and electricity every 5 years. The last time a rate review was conducted for water in Trinidad and Tobago was 1993. The last time it was done for electricity was 2006 and 2007. So the RIC has not been following the law robustly to review the rates of water and electricity, because in Trinidad and Tobago, these things are always mired in political controversy, where political parties in the past were afraid to review and to allow for the review of the rates for water and electricity, because it was always seen as a political lightning rod that can cost the ruling party, their stay in governance. But sometimes when we do that and we delay what's supposed to be done at the appropriate time, it is oftentimes to the detriment of the utility services and, by extension, the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Because if your water and your electricity services cannot provide a reliable supply to the citizen and to the country, then it is the citizen that stand to be disadvantaged as a result of that. So therefore, coming back to your question, as minister and as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, I feel very sad. I am very concerned about the safety of the folks at the RIC and the professionals there who have worked so hard to get to this point. And I ask that the national security forces, they examine what is taking place so that they can go to the respective locations to ensure that law and order is maintained.
There were a number of persons still in the line when I brought the meeting to an end. You know, sitting at the head table and looking at the entire room, one has a certain vantage point. And what I saw happening in the room and the fact that, you know, various events seemed to have been happening spontaneously and we had no idea where it would go next. That was why I ended that meeting. So the disruptions we had a gentleman who came with a loudspeaker, and that was the first interruption we had. He proceeded to play music through his loudspeaker. The same gentleman then went to the mic with 2 loaded flambeaus, and he actually said that he was thinking of lighting them, you know. And at that stage, I became very cautious and very wary because there were a number of persons in that room. And if, for example, he had proceeded with that act, then we could have had a very different situation. After he had been quelled a bit, we saw someone coming with a coffin, dragging it through the auditorium. And I began to question, you know, what would happen next, because we had no idea. I had no idea what were the next steps that were planned. I really thought it was particularly insensitive because the persons who came to the consultation, they had been raising concerns about COVID and we know we had a large number of deaths during the COVID pandemic there. And to bring a coffin, which could be emotive, it could trigger persons, you know, in unfortunate ways. I thought that was quite lacking in sensitivity, and as I said, I had no idea where we would be going next. I noticed also that the persons who seemed to have a lot of influence in the room, they were not moving at any stage to stop that kind of action. And therefore, I thought that I should stop it.
I hear of people complaining about not receiving a water supply and still having to pay WASA. What would you say to that, or even to possibly put a meter on? So if they don't receive the water, they don't pay. Is that a possibility?
And that is the direction that we have to go, because metering will ensure that these things don't happen. With metering, you pay for what you receive. And if you are on a scheduled supply, you pay for what you receive. You pay for not for what you consume. And if you, for one reason or the other, don't get the supply, then the meter will be empirical evidence that you did not receive the supply of water. So to address that, in addition to a lot of the work that we are doing to improve the supply of water, the drilling of wells, the installation of packaged water treatment plants in key areas across the country, the refurbishment of some of our major plants, all of these things are geared towards ensuring that those same customers get a supply of water. But to ensure that you pay for what you receive and or what you consume, the next phase, of course, will be looking at how we introduce metering, especially on the domestic front, to ensure that level of equity takes place in the way that our resource is managed, where water is managed. So, so customers, I want to assure them that yes, I understand it, because our billing is not based on a metered system, and this can only be resolved by introducing metering at the appropriate time when there's a supply of water for all of our impacted communities. And this is the direction in which the government is going, ensuring that we have a consistent and a reliable supply. And once that is achieved, then we introduce metering to ensure that you pay for what in fact you receive.
How is the process to select or identify these beneficiaries of this $1,000 grant?
We're going to be working with the Ministry of Social Development on this and to identify clearly who we target. Now, you would know that the ministry also distributes devices, laptops, via Meansters. That's run by the Ministry of Education. In this book grant device, we would want a closer collaboration with the Ministry of Social Development so that the families that are identified in their database already as those who require assistance from the government, these are the ones you'd want to target first. So we will be liaising with them to be able to implement that initiative.
How soon can we see this being rolled out? It's in the fiscal year, but can we see that happening in the first quarter of 2024?
Well, the book grant would be applied for the next academic year. So we'll be looking to give that to students and parents for the next year.
A big issue is the standardization of textbooks, which would allow students to reuse textbooks year after year. Can you say how soon these consultation talks would begin with these stakeholders?
Well, actually, the ministry would have issued in September of 2022 a freeze on changing of textbooks. So for this academic year, there was no change in the textbooks exactly because of that reason, because you recognize that there was, what was developing was a system where little changes were being made, textbooks could not be used from year to year, and that really induced some hardship on our parents. So since last year, we would have dealt with that so that the textbooks should not have changed for this year. What we are developing within the ministry is a textbook policy, because that has not been in existence. So what has been happening in many cases is that principals would be approached by booksellers who had books that they felt would be advantageous to students, and they would put them on the book list. So there is now need for regulation of how books get onto the book list, for an approved list of books and so on. So that policy is being worked on now by the ministry. And once it is in draft form, we will now then invite the stakeholders to take a look at it, give us their comments, their recommendations, so that we can move forward in that way. But in the meantime, we have already frozen the book list.
Of course, there are amendments that need to be made in some subjects because we always see differences in, let's say, something changes in geography, for instance. Amendments would need to be made for the following year. But how do we see this going forward? Is there a process in terms of the school? Who has the last say in terms of the book list? Is it the school? Is it the Ministry of Education?
At this point, the school. So that's why that policy is so important, so that we map out where the authority lies to put a book on a book list or change a book. Because I'm sure you've seen on social media, Facebook, people showing books with errors and so on. How do these books make it onto the book list? The last say at this point lies with the principal in putting a book on. But we need to revise that. There needs to be regulation, and that's the policy we are working on now. As it comes to school discipline, there is a matrix that we have discussed with stakeholders that is in place. So when an incident happens, the teacher is to report that to the principal. The principal looks at the level of it, they look at the discipline history of the student, and they can now decide whether they're going to call in a parent, have a parent conference, or whether it's something they can deal with just in the school. If the student is a repeat offender, then parents must be called in. They must be referred to school social worker so that we can look at exactly what's happening with that child, offer the counseling to both child and parent. If it persists, then the student now comes and an incident takes place, they come now for extended suspension, where there's a time that they don't go to school and intense focus is paid on parent conference, counseling, etc. And if that student, despite all of the efforts, does not seem to be able to regulate their behavior, then we get to the point of an expulsion warning, where we say to the student, it's a letter that I signed myself after reviewing the file, and we say to the student, if you persist, we are going to have to deal with expulsion. And if the student goes beyond that, well, then it gets to the point of expulsion. However, if something is gross enough that the student shows that, this is beyond the level of trying to deal with it with the counseling and so on, then one incident can get a student directly to the expulsion stage.
It's a remarkable success story, the MyLAT program, not only in terms of the academic achievements that flow from the participants, but also in terms of behavior change. Because many of the young men who entered this program did not do well at secondary school at all. They were either dropouts or underperformers coming out of secondary school with no O-levels. So you can imagine how pleased we all were when we saw persons coming out who came into that program with 0 O-levels, leaving with full certificates. As a matter of fact, the valedictorian of the last graduating class went in with 0 and came out of that with 4 1s and 2 2s. Certainly this program is making remarkable strides. And as I did mention at that graduation, we do intend to launch a pilot program for the young ladies that will come off in this fiscal, and therefore we will be able to see young ladies in similar circumstances access a similar program and show the similar level of success.
Talking about the MyLAT program, any plans to expand that to Tobago?
We are in current discussions with the THA in relation to all of the programs that we are having. As a matter of fact, I'm supposed to journey to Tobago again as we collaborate on our first initiative, which is the Shade House program. We will be giving to the THA a quantity of shade houses to establish for some of their young farmers in Tobago. And we intend to collaborate on the other programs as well. Milat is one that we have been in discussions with, but because it is a residential program, we have been able to accommodate participants from Tobago in the Milat program here in Trinidad. But we, as I said earlier, we do intend to collaborate with the THA to introduce some of these programs in Tobago. But the program will be expanded. We are currently refurbishing the Mausika Old Teachers Training College, where Milat currently resides, to be able to expand the intake there. And the government has as well taken on board the beach camp facility, the former Petrotrin facility in Palo Seco, which we are currently also doing some refurbishments and preparation works there to accommodate a Milat MyPart CCC program in South Trinidad. One of our programs that we have put a lot of emphasis on is the Youth in Agriculture initiatives. And only recently we launched at NAPA the programs, the three cohorts, the immediate cohorts for these youth in agriculture programs. This is the Shade House program, which is 100 young people each year. The aquaponic program, the aquaculture program, which is another 100 persons each year. And the most popular of them is the Homestead program, which trains annually, takes a cohort in of 200 full-time plus 200 part-time. And our mission is that in terms of youth in agriculture, we will by 2025 introduce 1,500 new farmers into the industry under the umbrella of these three programs. We will be getting a lot of traction, a lot of young people interested, and as you know, the Homestead program will give 2 acres of fertile land, a starter home, and a grant of $20,000, including a 2-year training program at UTT ECIAF. The Shade House program is being done in conjunction with UWI, and it's for protected agriculture under shade houses. We borrowed that program from the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, and we intend over the next 3 years to train 300 young persons in that area, another 200 in aquaculture. That program is also being done in conjunction with UWI. But in terms of youth entrepreneurship, it does not stop there. NEDCO falls under this ministry, and we as a government has approved a lot of programs under NEDCO. The major one that we will roll out in this fiscal is the Youth Micro Business Grant, which is $20,000, and we intend to target 1,000 young persons each year. So over the next 3 years, we will distribute to qualified applicants 3,000 micro grants each year for startup businesses. So we are training a lot of persons, but after they train, this is the opportunity for them to get involved as entrepreneurs into their own businesses. We also have the Business Accelerator Program, the Business Incubator Program, the business parks that we launched this year, as well as the Business Hub, which is a one-stop shop. So if you have an idea, you come into the hub and we take you from business plan, registration, mentoring, etc. So we have quite a number of programs geared towards getting persons into business to create jobs as opposed to job seekers.
Sunil, may I ask, do you want me to talk about 10 to 18? Because, we focus on 18 and over, but you have those young persons who in schools, secondary, primary schools, who you will also want to take a career path to entrepreneurship. And NEDCO is also having an intervention there. We have a number of NGOs and agencies who are going into schools and who are doing entrepreneurial programs in schools, and NEDCO support them. We are in about a month, next month, starting a program with University of the West Indies Open Campus in terms of one of their digital entrepreneurship programs, where they will have a particular intervention. And it's a pilot project, but nonetheless it's an intervention into the primary and secondary schools. And it gives, therefore, a nice transition when they become of age to really start a business. They'll be very much aware in terms of how to start a business. You had long-time junior achievers who would have gone to schools and done programs. You had programs, you had junior cooperatives that went into schools and do programs. So there's a sensitization at that level in terms of how to deal with money, how to become financially aware of financially inclusive. Because financial inclusion is a big buzzword now, but it's a big buzzword now, particularly for the young. And NEDCO is in line, is in stream to make sure from 10 to 100, long as they could walk, long as they could continue a business. You have a number of centurions now, you know. Long as you could sustain it, we are there to support.
This 10 to 18 age group, is this the baby program you were talking about?
Well, it's an initiative through agencies and through NGOs. Our primary thrust in NEDCO would be 18 and over, but because there is a need to look at that group, we facilitate that program through other agencies and NGOs.
As we move to expand the program, we have approximately 4,000 trainees currently, and the government has given us the commitment to move the program from 4,000 to 6,000. And therefore, and let me just take 2 steps back, because prior to COVID, we were at 6,000.
6,000 applicants or 6,000?
6,000 active trainees.
In
so
the
we
system,
actually
okay.
manage a cohort, I could say that, of 4,000 trainees currently.
Wow.
Taking it to 6,000 in 2023.
Yeah.
We have gotten that support. So what we are currently doing is marketing, doing that marketing to bring on the training providers, to bring them on from different levels, different skill sets. And that is why I'm happy that NEC and NGC, they are coming on board, because it's about the technical areas. The support system is there because we are in all schools, we are in all ministries, and from the public sector perspective, we're trying to get the private sector more on board, because one of the things, the government support private sector, because you get 60% of the stipend that you pay to the trainee up front, the government gives you back that. So in terms of the support system is there. It is just that, you know, I talk about the brand, and the program is 20 years old, and I guess we are trying to revitalize the OJT brand and build that confidence back in the brand. So that when you see that a trainee would have come out of the program, the value added you put on that is important.
The Developers Hub Challenge keeps coming up in your responses. Yeah. So just give us a little bit of information on the Developers Hub Challenge.
Yeah, I can give you a little flavor of it. We're going to have a launch of that. It's going to be it's probably launched early in July, a couple of weeks from now. The intent here is to, and it's going to happen in a couple of phases, but the first phase, what we're going to do is to have developers who are registered on the D-Hub. That's one of the things that you need to be. Nationals of Trinidad and Tobago who are registered on the D-Hub. We are going to ask you, and you're going to go through a series of things about issues that we can address that are pertinent to the society here. When we say, in this instance, we will put out a series of them. People can look at them and say, the developers will say, okay, I think we can work on this one, we can work on that one, we can work on this one. We will work with you to develop a proof of concept. You get to the point where the proof of concept is accepted and so on. While all of this is happening, we're not paying you for this. I want to be clear in this. We will issue awards for people who have been successful in their submissions. Get to the proof of concept phase. We look at those, we evaluate them. There's an evaluation committee. The criteria, all of that will be published. So it will be a transparent process. Committee will be formed to look at all of that. And then once you get to the proof of concept phase and we say, yes, this is something that is viable to get and turn into a mainstream product, what you would find is then that we, apart from progressing with a further award, we also now start putting you with other people, mentoring people, business people, etc., to develop that product into something that is going to be launched into the public space. So it's really a mechanism, because of the awards, to encourage people to come forth with stuff. There's another phase of that where we're going to ask you to bring your ideas, things that you have come up with, and said, you know, I've been looking around and I think this, if we did this, this can help society, or this can help Trinidad and Tobago, this can help this ministry, this can help this division, this civil society, tourism, something of that nature. And we say, listen, fine, we'll evaluate those, go through the same process, provide awards, work with you to develop a product that is available for mass distribution. You never know. Trinidad and Tobago has some of the most talented people in the world. You would be surprised what they have come up with already in terms of suggestions and how powerful what we have. The one plug I want to add to this, and it's for the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and it's a pet peeve that I have. People have this idea that when things are built in Trinidad and Tobago by Trinidad and Tobagonians, that somehow or the other it is not of the quality as if it was built somewhere else. I want to dispel that, and people who would have gone on to the portal that is associated with registration for this, you will find that it was built right here in Trinidad and Tobago by these guys and the team, well, like I said, 125, and they're all Trinidad and Tobago labs now. And I dare you to go around and look for one that has greater functionality or anything in it, or if we find anything deficient in that. The things we can build and develop here in Trinidad and Tobago will stand the test of scrutiny and quality anywhere, any part of the world and in the globe. So I want our people to be aware of that.
Now, Ms. Janelle, what has your involvement been in this project so far, and what are you excited about going forward?
I'll start from what we are excited, because we really are amazed by all this strategic vision and ambition of the government, of the institution and people working here. And they really love that image of Moko Jambi. Did I pronounce right? I think it's very important, because when working in different contexts, in different countries, we encounter very different situations. And of course, I'm coming from the country which is already pretty well advanced in digital transformation. Of course, we did our share of mistakes, we had our drawbacks, and that's okay. We learn from this. And then we can share this and support other countries, partner with them to move faster, just not, when you're a pioneer, it's exciting, but on the other hand, you really lose a lot of time, and then you can share that experience. So that's precisely what we are doing here. Talking about this particular project, it's really very much in line with the most advanced countries that are facing the challenge that in many countries of the world, the public sector is in this situation that the requirements, the push from the citizens, from the business to operate in a more efficient manner, to provide better digital services is growing every day. Because people are used to very high quality private sector services. We use Amazon, Netflix, Spotify, Uber, and all these things that are really very intuitive, very easy. And we want to do the same with the interactions with the public sector. That's understandable. We don't want to waste money. They say it should be easy. And it's not easy to build a good digital service for public sector because there are lots of legislation, procedures, institutional setups. But on the other hand, this cooperation with developers is like opening the public sector for more creative, more flexible work with IT professionals. And sometimes people working in public sector, we know the challenge, we know the problem, but they should not know all the potential technological solutions that can be put. They cannot know everything that is out there. So that's why this so-called GovTech approach, which means opening to co-creation, public institution with IT specialists, is very important trend.
I think what is really appreciated with Trinidad and Tobago is that GovTech Lab has a network of other institutions across the world that are doing this. You have countries of New Zealand, Australia, Brazil, UK, but in Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago is the first country to try to do something like this. So this is something that the country needs to be proud of, because as you mentioned, experimentation is not an easy thing. It's hard to open up, especially for the public sector, because that is the part of the mandate. You cannot risk things. But in terms of innovation, that is a step that must be taken. And we are very happy to work with the Ministry of Digital Transformation in that. And we seeing a lot of great things to happen in the future.
I got interested in software development when I was in university. I took many software engineering and computer science courses, and I found that this is really interesting to me. And when I came back, they were asking me where would I like to go, what would I like to do, and that's where I asked to get into the software development space. And my message to anyone who's interested in software development would be to just go at it full speed. There's so many opportunities, and I think register for Developers Hub right now, because this is a great platform, and I wish this was there sooner when I was getting into it. So yeah.
And what about you, Daniel?
Well, as I mentioned before, I'm a self-taught developer, so my career path wasn't always in the software development world. So I did mechanical engineering in university. So the first semester, everything went fine. And then in the second semester, while I was at university, COVID happened. And so we had to do all of our work from home. And it's actually while I was home there, I started to watch YouTube videos. I then went on to platforms such as LinkedIn and Coursera, where I decided to invest in myself and pay the money to get certified. And so that's how I got into the software development space. But if I had advice to someone who would reach somewhere like where I am today, I think I'm still along my path on my software development journey. But I would say to, as just said, sign up for the D-Hub now, because when I was starting off, I had to go and pay to invest in myself. We have free courses now with between 300 to 600 USD once you sign up for Developers Hub.
One of the insights we're getting from that national study we're doing is that Trinidad and Tobago, we do have an access problem. We have number of financial institutions, we have more ATMs and schools. You have a lot of optionality when it comes, and even some of the studies we do, over 80% of the population actually has access to a bank account. Our challenge is utilization, because less than 40% of people actually use their cards to do transactions. What you find happening is they would take all of their money out of their account and then choose to transact in cash. And those are some of the things we're trying to get to the bottom of, right? So, I mean, and simple use cases, as you said there, right? If I want to go to the Savannah and buy food on a Friday evening, there's no vendor in the Savannah that offers point-of-sale systems. So I would have to go and take out cash and you go to the Savannah. But when you think about the impact of that is, one, security, but then two, even for those vendors on the Savannah, I could only buy based on the amount of cash I have, and I'll probably only take out a limited amount of cash. So it's also restricting trade, where people might want to buy a souvenir or some impulse buy or get something else, you know. So we have, I would say, a good start in terms of some of the products. We already have a lot of institutions offering those services from a fintech perspective. It's really now about more awareness and to sort of increase the adoption by, you know, getting what I would say, focusing on particular segments of society and particular use cases. If you think about it, if you go into church, for example, and you have to pay, you know, you're giving tithes when they're passing around. If you have a $5 in a pocket, that's what you might want to give. But let's just say if the priest is saying, you know, we're trying to collect money for a special cause, if somebody's able to pass a terminal and be like, well, I have more money in my account, I might pay $40. So you understand how it starts to create those opportunities. So looking at those use cases, I think, is definitely going to help us at least provide proof of concepts and then scale from there.
In terms of what's next for InvestTT, how are you leveraging in the next decade or so?
So I talked about the challenge of investor awareness and being able to ensure that all those in the sectors that I've already mentioned are aware, and if they have an investment project, they come to Trinidad and Tobago and they take a look at us as a major option. It is in the public domain that Invest Trinidad and Tobago is going to be merged / amalgamated with Export Trinidad and Tobago, and they focus on the export promotion, as well as Creative TT that focuses on the film, fashion, and music. And so what that is creating a larger more resourced entity that is now consistently promoting Trinidad and Tobago in key markets, not just for investment, but also for exports of domestic products into those markets and coverage of all the major sectors, including those creative sectors. So we expect very shortly that amalgamation is going to be put in place. And so we see the resources available to us now to continue to deepen that investment promotion and overall country branding and promotion of Trinidad and Tobago as an investment destination and as a place from which goods and services can be purchased.
Your message to local or foreign companies to invest in TNT?
Foreign companies, if you have a project for Latin America and the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago is a serious contender to consider. InvestTT will work with you to provide you all the information required such that you can choose Trinidad and Tobago as your investment partner. Not necessarily just as an investment destination, but as a partner. And to the local domestic businesses that already understand operating in Trinidad and Tobago and they understand the export markets that they are looking to serve, again, InvestTT offers its services free of charge to support your decision making, to support your information gathering and analysis, to support your access to the regulatory approvals required, and to continue to support you as you are successful and looking to expand.
As 2023 comes to an end, would you say that you accomplished all that you set out to achieve in the last year?
Well, we certainly have not. The fact of the matter is, this is a new entity, and we have just realized our capability and ability with a project management team of 30 persons. We're able to get 300 plus road rehabilitation projects done per year. That is not a lot. Notwithstanding the different issues we have with getting our work program from the ministry, our line ministry, that in itself keeps us back from getting what we want done and to satisfy the general public. But again, I would still also say that we need more small contractors to register in the procurement depository, as well as we need to get more capacity, meaning more organizations similar to ours, to be able to conduct road rehabilitation work, to clear that backlog, and to ensure that we keep a pace with the rate at which roads are damaged in this country.
I know that we've seen on the media, social media, traditional media, where some communities have done some self-help, especially when it comes to like the pothole repairs in their communities. Is that something that is encouraged, or what do we do in those types of situations?
I understand and empathize with people who require relief, and sometimes they feel that they have to take it upon themselves. I am also not a fan of, how do I put it, the use of coal mix and anything else for road repairs. But again, I understand if there's a pothole in my neighborhood and I need to get relief today, I can't wait for the 1,281 backlog to clear for me to get relief. Okay, so I understand that. But at the same time, a proper road repair has nothing to do with coal mix, but it has to do with hot mix, which comes from an asphalt plant, which means you need to get a competent authority to be able to get that work done. Any other relief is temporary relief, and nothing's wrong with temporary relief, but they have to understand in the short term, 6 months, it'll have to be redone soon as the rains fall and it opens up again.
What can we expect in 2024 from the Ministry of Public Administration?
So in 2024, we have a lot of projects that are on the table, and I'm hoping a lot of them will come to fruition. We do have the work from home that we're hoping to finish in 2024, the introduction of the UE training program as part of the rollout of the Across the Service More Effective training program for public servants, to target more than the 1,500 odd people that we train currently. We have an RFP out for the development of the Point Fortin admin complex, and because there's already a building constructed on the site and it's just to refurbish and fix the building, we're hoping to actually open that building to the public with a full suite of services during 2024. We are hoping to turn the sod for the construction of our REMA admin complex. We have identified the site. There's some issue around the property that we are trying to sort out, but hopefully in the not too distant future we will be able to go out with an RFP on that and turn this on in 2024. The electronic HRM system, we are hoping to at least start the rollout of all of the modules for better management of the human resources in the public service, because you may recall that one of the huge HR challenges that we have is that it takes us 4 to 5 years to pay people their pension in the public service. Completely unacceptable. The Ministry of Finance, a year or two ago, to provide some relief to public servants, came to the Parliament and said, and sought permission, sought the approval of legislation to allow us to pay public servants at least the minimum pension that would be due to the lowest level public servants, so at least they get something. But that is $3,500. So a help, but not a fantastic approach for somebody who left the public service earning, say, $30,000 a month. How can they live on $3,500, right? So that what we really have to do is tidy up that pension system and introduce a more effective computation and payment of pensions. And we are seeking to have the EHRM system do that, among other things. It's going to be looking at the assessments, allowing us, the same staff assessments that we discussed earlier, allowing us to monitor those and implement those more efficiently, and just generally better manage the 40 to 60,000 people that make up the public service, civil service. As you probably are aware, members of the public have been complaining for ages about what they call the archaic dress code policy that you have. You can't go into a government office with your arms exposed, or in shorts or in slippers, that kind of thing. So we gave it some thought and did some investigation to determine what was a reasonable approach to a dress code policy, because we want to allow people as far as possible to get service as and when they need it, but not be indecent at the same time. What we will be doing in the next couple of weeks is advertising the policy, giving people practical examples of what is pro and what is acceptable and what is not, and hoping to launch it in January.
Yes, the increase on January 1st is not going to be an issue in terms of implementing. The issues will be in monitoring whether or not people are paying the minimum wage, and that requires us in the ministry to do a lot of work with regards to sensitizing people about the wage, indicating to them if they are not getting the wage, how they can pursue redress through the ministry. And we have our inspectors who go out in the field and actually look at people's books and ensure that they're paying the minimum wages. And what we try to do is to get them to correct their errors and their wrong ways by paying the minimum wage. And if not, then under the Minimum Wage Act, there are reliefs in law to compel them to pay the minimum wage.
How is the ministry going to ensure that employers abide by this law? And is there any recourse for employees who doesn't receive the increase?
Yes, the employees, if they are not getting the minimum wage, can use social media, email, or contact the ministry directly. And where those wages are not being paid, our inspectors will visit these establishments to ensure that the minimum wage, as determined, is paid.
Is there a fine attached to this in terms of if an employer does not abide by this law?
Yes, there are some punitive measures available to the ministry, but we try to use good sense because it's in nobody's interest to get into litigation and so on. And what we find is that the employers who do not abide by it, normally when we read them the Riot Act, they normally step in line and pay the required rates.
We at the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, we are always looking for ways to improve the way we interact with respond to the poor and vulnerable in society. I could mention briefly 4 of those major strategies that we are currently working on to improve our operations at the ministry. We have our National Register of Vulnerable Persons. This is what we are hoping to implement in the near future, and we would register 100% of the population of Trinidad and Tobago onto the register, and that will give us an opportunity to monitor the poverty and vulnerability conditions of individuals and households in Trinidad and Tobago. This will help us to improve the way we identify and target the poor and vulnerable in society. We also have our Social Services Empowerment Unit. Now, this is envisioned to be a one-stop shop where individuals can come to the ministry at the location of the SSE and apply for all government's programs, grants, and services within the social sector. We also have our ISIMS, which is the Integrated Social Enterprise Management System. Now, this we are hoping would transform the way that we intake prospective clients as well as process applications of persons who would like to access our grants and services at the ministry. It will reduce the time from intake to delivering that grant and service to the individuals and households. Okay. We also have planned to develop our National Poverty Reduction Strategy. Now, this strategy would outline the plans of the ministry to meet the targets, and this is not just at the ministry level, this is also at the national level, and our national policies also, as I mentioned earlier, would have incorporated the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So we are hoping that this would help us in meeting our targets set, and as I mentioned earlier, we just have around 7 years before the time would expire on the Sustainable Development Goals.
The Disability Affairs Unit of the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services seeks to promote practices, programs, and attitudes that foster the inclusion and full participation of persons with disabilities in all spheres of society.
And what are some of the initiatives pursued by the division in support of persons with disabilities?
The Disability Affairs Unit will conduct things such as we implement and monitor the national policy on persons with disabilities, as well as the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We do advocacy to promote the human rights as well as the inclusion and full participation of persons with disabilities. We do sensitization for both private and public entities in how to interact with, communicate with, and relate to persons with disabilities. And we also do provide technical support and referrals to persons with disabilities for entities and families of persons with disabilities who seek information with regards to disabilities. We network with NGOs, regional, international, locally, as well as mass media and so forth, to provide information, to provide technical support, to provide sensitization, and to advocate for persons with disabilities.
Dr. Piper, what is the importance of getting your hearing tested, and how often should persons do this? I mean, it's not something that persons would, I think regularly think about. It comes as naturally as maybe breathing. So we don't think about it until maybe there's an issue. Absolutely. But in your professional opinion, you could let us know.
It's an excellent question. I think I could talk all day about it, but I'll try to keep my response succinct. Let's start with children, because I am a pediatric audiologist by training. So I will say, if you have a niece, a nephew, a little one, a grandchild, or son or daughter, that's between the ages of 1 and 5, and they are a late talker, delayed speech and language development. They're not meeting their milestones as we would expect. it's vitally important that we check that child's hearing as part of a holistic assessment of that child. Even when we go up to school age, if you have children who are struggling in school, poor academic progress, teachers have great concern, we often say, check hearing, check vision. Those are the two most important senses for learning. So children are not often able to articulate what their difficulties or their struggles are. So we have to be proactive about checking, especially with our little ones. Now, if we advance in years to the adult population, I'll put it across to you this way. From my perspective, we're very keen on testing our eyes. We check our vision regularly, we check our blood pressure, check our blood sugar levels, go to the dentist. But hearing tends to be a neglected and more forgotten sensory system. So I will say truthfully, for all of us, as we age, our hearing declines. That's a known fact, and it's well understood in the medical community. So if we can appreciate and understand that our hearing decreases as we age, then we can think about, well, for some of us, it impacts us more significantly than others, and some of us more earlier than others. And so the degree of hearing loss you might experience or the age at which it might occur really depends on a number of factors. I just wanted to throw this out there for us to consider. Family history. So genetics can play a big part, a big role in how early or how significant of a hearing loss we experience later on in life. The decades and decades of listening to dangerously loud levels of music, right? So our leisure activities can also put us at risk for hearing loss. But besides leisure, also occupational. So we have a lot of persons in the construction industry, the oil industry, because of the nature of their jobs, they are exposed to dangerously loud levels of noise.
In terms of the parenting unit, I mean, how critical is this for men to be, a part and parcel of trying to get men to actually parent and get involved with their children and so on?
Okay, well, it is critical, as I have mentioned, a lot of men, again, they don't talk about their feelings, right? They tend to bottle up their emotions. And we know we live in a Caribbean country where society dictates that women are more emotional and men tend to, be more stoic, right? So this parenting workshop, again, is really to give them that space where they can talk about issues if they are currently facing with their children, how to properly discipline their children, how they can develop effective communication skills with their children. Any issue that they are currently facing, this program is geared towards them and to help them along the way. Right?
School indiscipline has been a problem throughout the years, including in 2023. I mean, I can't remember the amount of times I've heard the Minister of Education, Dr. Nian Gadsby-Dolly, talk about school indiscipline and talking about, the parenting aspect of it in terms of that. Have you been in collaboration with the Ministry of Education, and how is that going?
Well, actually, certain schools has reached out to the parenting unit requesting that we do parenting workshops for them, right? So yes, we do parenting workshops for different schools across Trinidad and Tobago. So yeah, we have been in collaboration with the Ministry of Education in that regard.
Since the launch of the establishment of the Suicide Prevention Hotline, we have seen an increase to date. We actually celebrated 1 year anniversary on November the 22nd, 2022, when the hotline was established. And from then to now, when we launched in June officially, we see an increase where people are now calling in when they are in crisis, when they're feeling suicidal. So it's not only suicide, but even when they're in crisis, they're having family dispute, they would call the 800 COPE hotline and they receive intervention. So yes, we see an increase in our calls to date.
Can I ask, what are some of the nature of the calls that you receive in terms of what are people calling with their issues?
Right, so some of the issues that they would call in is that some of them may be experiencing separation, divorce. Some of them just feeling emotionally, I had enough. Financial difficulties they are experiencing. Sometimes they have grief and loss. So when you look at what they are going through, they feel that they lose all hope. So those are some of the issues that they call about.
Now, Sunil, last year, masqueraders returned to the Savannah stage after the 2-year restrictions due to COVID were lifted. When we put NCC, Pan Trinbago and the Promoters Association on set together to discuss the future of Carnival, the Carnival Bacchanal was inevitable.
We have no obligation to private people we have no obligation to do that. These are private entities that are not accountable to us. Pan Trinbago is accountable to us. Tuco is accountable to us. They are not accountable to us. They could get up any morning and say, we're going to do X, Y, and Z.
So it doesn't fall
under him. Yes,
no,
exactly.
and that's why we felt slighted. Wasn't that we felt slighted with the NCC? You know, this is not Gypsy's fault at all. We felt slighted by the government. Is that if you have a Ministry of Tourism, Culture and the Arts, they are the ones who are really in charge of this whole thing, or the carnival product itself. NCC falls under them, yes. But if the Promoters Association is part of the carnival product, just as they would have held a meeting last year, because Gypsy and they would have been there.
We were in
all the carnival stakeholders were there, and we were mapping out what we were doing. Every year, that should take
And we did that because of the circumstances that existed, and we wanted to do the taste of whatever it was, and we wanted to, they wanted to have what is called a consolidation of all the things that we wanted to do. So that is what we do in that. But there is no obligation.
But again, it is for us, for me, Gypsy, in terms of the carnival product, is a tourism product that puts Trinidad and Tobago on the map. And I don't think we should be operating in silos moving forward. I think there should be both private sector and public sector coming together and sitting to see how we could develop the carnival product as best as we could to market it out there, to make sure that we always number one. Because we can help NCC in terms of giving advice, we can help them in terms of having promoters, help them to promote some of the events, because, and there's something, Gypsy, that we have been raising with you all before. I mean, not in a forum like this, but we have been seeing some of the events that would have been put on, the numbers have been dying in terms of some of the NCC events. And this is us being real.
Well, none of the
NCC
events
but
is dying. All our events, which is Pan, Mass, Calypso, have retained their sustainability. But what has been dying, I know what you're saying, and those are, again, private entities that in some ways are subvented.
And we are in the carnival season, so we can surely look forward to more of the Bacchanal.
Yeah.
Finally, this evening, TNT lost 2 political stalwarts over the last week, and we want to take this opportunity to extend condolences to the family of former Prime Minister Basdev Pandey, who passed away on January 1st at the age of 90.
We are also extending condolences to the family of the first Chief Secretary of the Tobago House of Assembly, Ho Choy Charles, who passed away on December 31st at the age of 77. I am Ayana Carter.
And I'm Sonolala. Thanks to everyone who made this evening's production possible. On behalf of the entire crew, have a good night, and we want to leave you with some of what happens behind the scenes.
See you all next Sunday, and all the best for 2024. And that's where you wanted me to put, hey, ha! No, I'm not doing that.
The work continues, and more young people.
Live from 11A Marvel Road. This is TTT News. First at 6 p.m.
Get any blue person?
Blue.
Do all your thing now, man. I had jokes too, you know.
And that's our show. Thank you, Ministers Maurice Julian and Dino Brigger, for joining us on this week's episode of Delving Deeper.
Great, bye.
Oh,